Especially over the past year, so many of us have experienced losses. We may have been ill, or we may have known others who fell ill, some perhaps for a long time. And so many of us have known the loss of a dear family member or a loved one during this pandemic. So I think we can all relate to the first reading from Acts today with Aeneas, the paralyzed man, or with the family and friends of Tabitha, the woman who fell ill and died. Perhaps their circumstances brought to your mind a loved one close to your heart who you know has been ill or who is ill now. Maybe you yourself have been ill this past year and you can recall that vividly. Or you may recall the memory of someone who has died. I don't know about you, but when I think of those loved ones, it can be hard to hear the story in the first reading of these individuals being miraculously restored to health by St. Peter. I'm tempted to ask why God would heal those people or restore that person to health, but not the person that I know and love. Maybe you've thought that too, especially over this past year. It's an understandable part of our sorrow at the losses we've endured. The good news is that God understands that hurt too. In Jesus, God has fully entered the human condition. He knows what it is like to experience loss. Think of how he wept at the tomb of his friend Lazarus. In today's gospel, you wouldn't be wrong imagining that he is sad to see so many stop following him because of his teaching about how he himself is the bread of life for the world. That is, his whole life is spiritual nourishment for all of us on the journey, which of course we celebrate and have celebrated throughout the church's history each day in the Eucharist. But perhaps you can hear the sadness at that loss in the question Jesus asks to his closest disciples. Do you also want to leave? I think it is perhaps the most heartbreaking question in the entire Bible. The losses Jesus experienced in his life, the ones we experience in our lives, are real. In times of suffering and loss, we're often left without answers we wish we had. And we have to place our faith and trust in God and in God's long view of our whole life, which doesn't end here, but which continues in beautiful ways we can hardly imagine in the life to come. It's also interesting that Peter responds to Jesus on behalf of the others to his question. Peter is often seen in the Gospels as missing the point of Jesus' message. And we know he even denied Jesus on the night of Holy Thursday. But here, he gets it right away. To whom else shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. The healing of Aeneas, the raising of Tabitha, the response of Peter, and the promise of Jesus are there to remind us, even in the midst of losses we have endured, that God sees and hears our pain and never abandons us in it. And God has prepared for us in this life, and especially in the one to come, more blessings than we can possibly imagine. God doesn't take away the pain of our losses, but helps us to see through them to the future that God has in mind for each one of us and for all of us. God give you peace.